I was folding laundry when the knock came. Not the soft, familiar rhythm of a neighbor or the impatient rap of a delivery man. This one was firm, official, the kind of knock that makes your heart dip before you even know why. When I opened the door, two strangers in matching navy blue blazers stood on my porch, clipboards in hand, polite smiles stretched too tightly across their faces. "Mrs. Green?" the woman asked. I nodded. "We're here to finalize the inspection. The new owners will be moving in next week." I blinked. "I'm sorry, what inspection?" The man glanced at a sheet, as though he hadn't expected confusion. "This is 243 Maplewood, yes? The property sale closed 3 days ago." For a moment, I thought maybe they had the wrong house, or the wrong name, or the wrong life. Because my house, the creaking, sun-warmed home I had built over 32 years, wasn't for sale. It couldn't be. I felt the room tilt, even though we were outside. The woman's voice blurred into static as my pulse thundered in my ears. The breeze carried the faint smell of wet soil from the garden my husband and I had planted before he passed. Somewhere behind me, the washing machine buzzed its finished cycle, indifferent to the world collapsing around it. I remember gripping the doorframe because suddenly my knees wouldn't hold me. "There's been a mistake," I said. My voice didn't sound like mine. It was too thin, too soft. "I didn't sell my house." The man frowned, flipping a page. "It says here the owner of record is Miss Laura Green, your daughter?" My mouth got dry. My hand started to tremble so violently that one of the papers he held fluttered to the porch floor. I wanted to say, there must be another Laura Green, some kind of fraud, maybe a misunderstanding. But deep down, beneath the confusion, I felt it. The hollow, sick knowing. My daughter had sold my house, the one she had grown up in, the one her father and I had built room by room, paycheck by paycheck, the one where her baby footprints still marked the old concrete path in the backyard. I don't remember what I said after that. I think I just nodded, closed the door, and stood there, staring at the brass handle. My reflection warped in it, small, distorted, unrecognizable. My hands were cold. My chest felt heavy, as if the walls themselves had started leaning in. From the kitchen window, I could see the oak tree my husband planted the year Laura was born. Its branches stretched toward the house like they were trying to protect it. But it was too late. The papers were signed, the ink was dry. And just like that, without a word, without a warning, everything that anchored me was gone. That was the moment I understood. Love can haul you out quietly for years, and you won't know until the walls of your life collapse and you realize you'd given every brick away. People like to say betrayal happens in a single moment, a knife, a lie, a revelation, but that's not true. It happens slowly, over years, like rot in the foundation of a house you thought was solid. Laura wasn't always this way. When she was little, she'd fall asleep on my chest while I hummed lullabies I learned from my mother. She had the kind of laugh that filled the whole house. Even after her father died, that sound kept me going. It was proof that some part of life still sparkled. Her father, Michael, passed when Laura was 19. Car accident, ice on the road, wrong turn home from work. I remember sitting in that cold hospital corridor, holding Laura's hand as she sobbed into my shoulder. I promised her then, through my own tears, "We'll be okay. I'll take care of everything." And I did. For 21 years, I kept that promise. I took an extra job at the library to cover her college tuition. When her student loans came due, I refinanced the mortgage. When she wanted to move to the city after graduation, I co-signed the lease. When she divorced her first husband, I helped her start over, paid the lawyer, the movers, the security deposit. It wasn't all at once. It was hundreds of small, well-intentioned decisions that seemed harmless in isolation. "Just until I get back on my feet, Mom. Can I borrow it? I'll pay you back next month. I don't know what I'd do without you." Every plea came wrapped in affection and exhaustion, and I, lonely, grieving, desperate to be needed, kept saying yes. When she came back to live with me 5 years ago, It felt almost comforting at first. She said she needed a place to reset. She had been laid off from her job, and I told her, stay as long as you need. We settled into a quiet rhythm. I cooked dinner, she scrolled through job listings. I'd wake up to coffee brewing, a small gesture that made me think maybe she was grateful. But then came the subtle shifts. She started getting mail addressed in both our names. She took over managing the bills to make things easier. When I asked about certain withdrawals, she'd say, just the utilities, Mom, don't worry about it. Looking back now, I realize how carefully it was done. Softly, sweetly, invisibly. She was weaving control around me strand by strand. The warning signs were there, but I kept looking away. When she insisted on updating my phone plan, I told myself she was just being tech savvy. When she brought in a financial advisor friend to discuss estate planning, I thought she was finally taking an interest in my future. I wanted to believe she loved me the way I loved her. There was one night, about a year before the sale, when something almost broke through. I was sitting at the kitchen table, balancing my checkbook, and I noticed the property tax statement had a new mailing address, hers. When I asked, she brushed it off. It's just easier for me to handle things online. You always forget passwords. She laughed, kissed my cheek, and poured me tea. I remember feeling a flicker of doubt, then guilt for even suspecting her. She was my daughter, my only child. So I said nothing. The months blurred together after that. She got a new job, real estate assistant of all things. She dressed sharper, started talking about investments and market timing. Sometimes she'd mention people she met at open houses, her tone different, calculated, confident. I didn't realize she was learning how to sell. She started saying things like, Mom, you should really think about downsizing. Or, wouldn't you be happier in a condo closer to me? I laughed it off at first, said I'd die in that house. She'd just smile and say, we'll see. I should have seen then what she was planning, but I was tired. I was getting older. I told myself she just wanted what was best for me. And the truth was, part of me liked that she was finally taking charge of something. Then one day she came home with champagne and told me she'd gotten a promotion. We celebrated in the living room with the same cheap glasses Michael and I had used on our first anniversary. She hugged me and said, "You're my rock, Mom. I couldn't have done it without you." That was the last time I remember feeling safe around her, because not long after that, she began asking for signatures. "Just some paperwork, Mom, legal stuff for the business. I just need your initials here." I didn't read them all. God help me. I trusted her. When I think back now, I see it clearly. Every form, every gentle nudge, every "just trust me" was a step toward the day two strangers would show up at my door. It wasn't a single betrayal. It was a slow bleed. And I let it happen. Because love, when it's blind, doesn't protect you. It blinds you to the theft of your own life. I remember sitting on the porch that night after they left, the sun dipping low behind the oak tree. I called her 4 times. No answer. When she finally picked up hours later, she sounded irritated. "Mom, what's wrong now?" "What's wrong?" I whispered. "People came today. They said the house was sold. My house." There was a pause. Then she sighed, like I was being unreasonable. "Oh, that? It's complicated, okay? We'll talk about it later." I felt my throat close. "You sold it?" Her voice hardened. "Technically, it was in both our names. I just handled the transaction." And that's when I realized this wasn't confusion. This wasn't misunderstanding. She'd planned this. She'd counted on my trust. I hung up before I could hear another word. That night, I sat alone in the house that was no longer mine, surrounded by walls that suddenly felt foreign. The refrigerator hummed. The clock ticked. And I realized the truth that hurt most of all. I had spent my entire life building safety for someone who saw me only as equity. It started with a notebook. not a fancy one, just an old ledger I found in the back of the kitchen drawer, the same place I used to keep grocery lists and recipes from the years when Laura was small and we still had Sunday dinners. The cover was frayed, pages yellowed at the edges. I sat at the dining table that night, pen shaking in my hand, and decided to do something I'd never done before: put numbers to the years. Not feelings, not excuses, not "I did my best." Just numbers. I wrote the title at the top of the page: What I Gave. At first, I couldn't remember everything. Decades blur when you're constantly surviving. But as I started listing, it all came back in flashes. Every check, every favor, every time I told myself it was just helping my daughter. College tuition. 4 years at Northridge University, $24,000 in total. I took a second job at the library back then, shelving books until my back ached. Her first apartment, security deposit and first month's rent, $2,300. New mattress, couch, kitchen set, $1,150. Divorce lawyer, $3,800. I remember writing that check while pretending I didn't notice my own overdue electric bill. Credit card bailout, 2014, $5,600. She cried over the phone, said her ex ruined her credit. I told her, "It's okay, honey, we'll fix it." Car loan, co-signed, $9,200, paid off entirely by me when she fell behind. Down payment help, first house, $18,000. Lost when she sold it and moved back in with me. Monthly expenses since moving back, 5 years. Groceries, $400 a month. Utilities, $250 a month. Phone and internet, $150 a month. 5 years is roughly $48,000. Property taxes, insurance, and maintenance. Even after she took over handling it, I'd still transfer funds monthly. Estimated $1,200 a month. 3 years of that is $43,200. By the time I finished the first page, my hand was cramping. I turned the paper over and kept going. Total so far, $155,250. I sat back, staring at the number. The digits didn't even look real. A house's worth. Literally. The irony hit like a punch to the chest. I had, in my own way, bought the house twice. Once with my husband, when we were young and hopeful, and again through decades of sacrifice disguised as motherhood. I flipped to a clean page. What I lost. My savings account, $27,000, drained slowly over the years. My retirement fund, cashed out early, $14,000 penalty. The painting classes I always promised myself I'd take after Michael passed. The vacations that never happened. Friends I stopped seeing because Laura needed me. Sleep, peace, trust. Under that list, I added one final line: the right to feel safe in my own home. When I finished, I just stared at it all. The sums, the lists, the handwriting that had grown messier with each line. I tried to swallow, but my throat felt raw. This wasn't anger yet. It was something quieter, heavier, the kind of grief that doesn't wail. It just sits with you, silent and patient. I turned on the lamp beside me, light spilling over the ledger. I forced myself to calculate the hours I'd worked, roughly 2,000 hours a year, 30 years straight, and probably 10,000 more since Michael died. 40 years of work, 2 jobs at times, dozens of missed birthdays, sleepless nights, small meals so she could have enough. And what did I receive in return? A daughter who saw my home as an asset to liquidate. I traced my finger over the total again. The ink shimmered faintly under the light. $155,250. That number wasn't money. It was time. It was my life, translated into currency. I felt my pulse in my temples, a dull pounding. My eyes burned, but no tears came. For the first time, I realized love isn't limitless. It's labor. It's a resource. And once it's spent without return, you're left empty, like a bank account that never refills. I closed the notebook slowly and rested my hand on it. The paper was warm from my touch. Then I whispered to the quiet room, "No more." The words felt small at first, fragile, but they hung in the air, steady. For the first time in years, I wasn't thinking about what Laura needed. I was thinking about what I'd lost and what I was still willing to reclaim. That night, I didn't sleep. But for once, I wasn't restless. I was awake with purpose. The reckoning had begun. It happened the next morning, quietly, almost accidentally. No grand declaration, no cinematic realization, just a phone call that shifted everything. Laura called around 9 a.m. I was sitting in the living room, my notebook still open beside a half-cold cup of coffee. Sunlight streamed through the curtains, catching dust motes in the air. I remember how beautiful it looked, like the world hadn't yet learned what she'd done. Her voice came through cheerful, too cheerful. "Morning, Mom. Listen, I know yesterday was a lot. You probably got confused. The sale's done, but it's a good thing. You'll thank me later." I didn't answer right away. I just listened to the hum of her voice, that slick tone she used when she wanted to manage me, the tone that used to make me feel small. "Laura," I said slowly, "you sold my home." There was a pause. Then she laughed softly. "Our home, technically. You signed the paperwork months ago, remember?" Something inside me flickered, a low, strange calm. I said, "No, I don't remember," because I didn't understand what I was signing. "Oh, Laura, don't start." But I didn't let her finish. "You knew I wouldn't. You knew I trusted you." She went silent for a moment. I could hear her exhale sharply through her nose, the same irritated sound she made as a teenager when I told her no. "You're being dramatic," she said finally. "This house was too big for you anyway. You'll have enough money to get something smaller. I did this for you." There it was. The script. For you. The excuse that made her theft sound like love. My hands were shaking, but not from fear this time, from restraint. I looked around the living room, at the walls I'd painted myself, the photographs of Michael still smiling from their frames. Everything we built together. Every piece of me. "No," I said quietly. "You did this for you." The silence on the line stretched. I could almost hear her frown forming. "Mom, no," I said again louder. My throat felt raw, but my voice was steady. "You don't get to call this love." It was the first no I'd said to her in years, maybe decades. And the moment it left my mouth, something shifted. It wasn't dramatic, just a soft click somewhere deep inside me, like a lock sliding into place. I felt lighter. Not happy, not relieved, just lighter. "Fine," she said coldly. "If you want to make this hard, that's on you. The sale's done. You can be upset, but we need to figure out your next step." "My next step," I repeated. "I'll handle it." She laughed again, that dismissive sound that always used to make me back down. "You can't even handle your email without help, Mom. You need me." Something like amusement flickered in my chest. "We'll see." I hung up. For a full minute, I just sat there, staring at the phone in my hand. The room felt different, quieter, but not empty. My palms tingled, my breath came faster. And underneath it all, a strange warmth spread through me. Power. Small, fragile, but real. I stood up, walked to the front door, and opened it. The air outside smelled like rain and cut grass. The same breeze that had carried the bad news the day before now felt clean somehow, sharp and new. I looked out at the yard, the flower beds I'd tended alone since Michael's death, the oak tree that had grown strong enough to shade half the house. And I said it again, softly to the morning air. No more. Then I took my first action. I found the folder where I kept all my important papers. Birth certificate, mortgage, will. I gathered every envelope Laura had ever helped me organize. Then I called my friend Janet, who'd worked as a paralegal before retirement. "Janet," I said, my voice trembling, "can you help me read something?" That call led to another, to a lawyer, then to a financial advisor. Each conversation peeled back another layer of Laura's deception, but instead of breaking me, it steeled me. With every discovery, I felt myself come back into focus. The shame started to fade. The confusion dissolved. In its place came something sharper, resolve. That afternoon, I changed the locks. That evening, I opened a new bank account. By the end of the week, I'd filed a fraud alert and requested every document tied to my name. Each step felt terrifying and exhilarating all at once. My hands still shook, but now it was from adrenaline, not helplessness. When Laura texted that night, "Mom, you're overreacting. Don't make this harder," I didn't reply. For the first time in years, I didn't owe her an explanation. I closed my phone, exhaled, and whispered into the empty kitchen, "I'm done." The word echoed softly, landing somewhere deep inside me. It didn't erase the betrayal, or the loss, or the ache. But it was a beginning, the first yes I'd said to myself in a very long time.
At first, the silence between us was almost peaceful. I thought maybe she'd accepted my decision to cut contact, that she was giving me space. But I should have known better. Silence in Laura's world was never surrender. It was strategy. The first wave came 3 days later. The calls. 21 missed calls in one afternoon. I watched my phone light up over and over again as I sat in the lawyer's office, going through the stack of documents that proved she'd transferred ownership of the house 6 weeks before the sale, using my electronic signature on forms I'd never seen. Each ring cut through the air like a warning siren. I didn't answer, not once. Then came the messages. "Mom, you're scaring me. Why aren't you picking up? We need to talk about this calmly. I did everything for your benefit. Don't make me look like the bad guy here." The guilt crept in quietly, like an old friend. For a brief, shameful moment, I almost called her back. But then my lawyer, Ms. Evans, a calm woman with steel gray hair and eyes that missed nothing, looked up from the papers and said, "You didn't just sign away your house, Mrs. Green. You signed power of attorney." My blood went cold. Power of what? "She had control over your assets for nearly a year," Miss Evans said softly. "This was calculated." Calculated. The word hit harder than any slap could have. When I left her office, the sunlight felt wrong. Too bright, too revealing. I got into my car and sat there gripping the steering wheel until the trembling in my hands stopped. That night, she showed up. I heard the knock around 8:30 p.m., sharp, deliberate. My stomach turned. Through the peephole, I saw her standing there, wearing her favorite cream coat, face polished into that mask of practiced concern. "Mom," she said when I opened the door an inch, "we can't do this. You're letting outsiders poison you against me." I almost laughed at the irony. "Outsiders? You mean people who don't lie to me?" Her lips tightened. "I didn't lie. I just made decisions you weren't capable of making anymore." The words sliced clean through me. "Capable? You've been forgetful, Mom. You don't even remember what day you paid bills. I was trying to protect you. If you start claiming otherwise, people will think you're losing it." There it was, the gaslight. Smooth, practiced, cruel. I opened the door wider, meeting her eyes. "You can stop pretending this was for me. You did it because you wanted control, because you thought I wouldn't notice until it was too late." Her face cracked for just a second. Fear flickered behind the arrogance. Then she straightened. "Fine, believe what you want, but you'll regret this when you're alone and no one's left to help you." "I've been alone for years, Laura," I said softly. "You just kept me too busy to notice." Her expression hardened. "You have always been ungrateful." "Ungrateful?" I laughed once, sharp, bitter. "I gave you everything I had. My money, my time, my trust. You took my home and called it love." She stepped closer, lowering her voice. "You don't want to make this a legal thing, Mom. You'll lose." "I already did," I said, and closed the door. Her voice rose through the wood. "You're making a mistake." I turned the deadbolt slowly, deliberately, listening to the click echo through the hallway like a final punctuation mark. The next week was worse. She began calling mutual friends, twisting the story. "I'd lost my mind," she said. "I was confused. being manipulated, taken advantage of by greedy lawyers. One by one, the messages trickled in. Old neighbors, church friends, even my cousin Beth. She said, "You're going through something. Do you want to talk?" "She's worried sick, you know." It was subtle, soft pressure, concern disguised as care. But I recognized it now for what it was, manipulation through reputation. When that didn't work, she escalated again. The guilt. "You're my mother. I did everything for you. After everything Dad left us with, I was trying to keep you safe. You're throwing away your family." Each message chipped away at my resolve, but I refused to answer. Then came the threats. "I talked to a lawyer. You signed those forms willingly. If you accuse me of fraud, I'll have to defend myself. You don't want this to go public, Mom. People will think you're incompetent." That last one almost broke me. Not because it was true, but because it was the kind of lie that feeds on old fears. For years, I had been afraid of being seen as weak, old, irrelevant, and she'd learned to weaponize that fear like a scalpel. I remember sitting on my porch one night, clutching my phone, staring at those messages. The oak tree rustled overhead, the air heavy with the scent of wet leaves. I wanted to cry, to scream, to ask why. Instead, I breathed, slow, steady. And then I wrote my own message. "This is the last time you contact me directly. All future communication goes through my lawyer. I wish you peace." I hit send. My hands were trembling, but my heart was steady. The next morning, she sent 38 texts in a row. By noon, she was at my door again. I didn't answer. That evening, Miss Evans called. "You did the right thing. We'll handle it from here." That sentence, "we'll handle it," was a kind of grace I hadn't known in years. For the first time, I wasn't alone. Weeks passed. Laura tried new tactics, emails pretending to be conciliatory, letters quoting Bible verses about forgiveness, even a call from her ex-husband telling me she's really sorry, you know. But every time I felt less shaken, less guilty. Each attempt only strengthened the wall between us, a wall built not from bitterness, but from survival. Still, the nights were the hardest. I'd sit awake in bed wondering how the girl who once painted my Mother's Day cards with glitter and hearts could grow into someone capable of this kind of cruelty. The answer, I realized one sleepless night, was simple. Because I'd taught her that love meant giving until it hurt, and she'd learned that lesson too well. So now, I had to teach both of us something new, that love without respect is just dependency in disguise. That week, I started therapy. My counselor, a gentleman named Dr. Reyes, said something that stuck with me. He said, "Boundaries aren't walls to keep people out. They're doors with locks. You decide who enters and who doesn't." I wrote that on a sticky note and placed it above my mirror. The next time Laura called, I didn't feel my stomach twist. I just looked at the phone, read her name, and whispered, "Not this time." Then I set the phone down, made myself tea, and watched the sky fade to twilight through the window. The storm hadn't passed yet, but I could feel it shifting. The worst of her fury wasn't the end. It was the sign that I was finally, truly slipping beyond her reach. The first morning I woke up without checking my phone for her messages felt strange. Too quiet. Too still. For months, my days had started with the sting of her words. Accusation, guilt, manipulation, all lined up like soldiers waiting to attack before sunrise. But now there was nothing. No calls, no texts, no threats, just the steady tick of the clock on my nightstand and the soft hum of the refrigerator in the next room. For a moment, I didn't know what to do with the silence. It felt like standing in the middle of an empty church after the last hymn, the echoes of something sacred and broken still clinging to the air. But then I realized, this was peace. Not the kind you pray for, the kind you build. It started with small things. I changed my phone number. It terrified me how difficult that simple act felt, like cutting a cord that had been there for 30 years. But once it was done, the relief was immediate, physical. I closed the old email account she had access to and opened a new one. I updated my banking security, moved what was left of my savings to a fresh account, and handed my lawyer every document I could find. It wasn't about revenge anymore. It was about reclaiming my name, my breath, my sanity. I began writing again. Not letters, not legal statements, but journals.
every morning I'd sit by the kitchen window with coffee and pour my thoughts onto the page. At first, it was messy, angry, grief-stricken. I wrote about how she betrayed me, how I felt like a fool for trusting her, how the house still smelled like lavender and dust even after everything. But then, slowly, the words shifted. I began writing about the garden, how the marigolds were blooming again despite being neglected for months. I wrote about the neighbors who'd brought me casseroles when they heard what happened, about the way the sunlight fell on the same tiles my husband laid with his hands 30 years ago. It hit me one morning, pen hovering over the page. The house wasn't gone. Not yet. The sale hadn't fully cleared. The lawyers were still fighting it. And even if it did, the memories weren't tied to the bricks. They were inside me. And she couldn't sell that. Therapy helped more than I expected. Dr. Reyes was patient, steady, never pitying. He told me something that stung at first, but saved me later. Forgiveness doesn't mean letting her back in. It means putting down what she made you carry. I sat with that for days. I realized I'd been dragging her shadow through every room, through every memory. I was still living inside the cage she built, even after I'd closed the door behind her. So I began to forgive. Not her, not yet, but myself. I forgave myself for not seeing it coming, for raising her to think love meant control, for letting her voice define my worth, for believing that motherhood meant endless sacrifice, even when it broke me. Each forgiveness was a small rebellion. One day, I found an old photo album while cleaning the living room. Inside, there was a picture of Laura at 6 years old, missing her 2 front teeth, standing proudly next to the oak tree her father planted. Her hand rested on the trunk, tiny and certain. I stared at it for a long time. That little girl didn't know what betrayal was. She only knew she was loved. And I realized then, somewhere along the way, both of us had forgotten that love isn't a transaction. It's a choice. And choices can be remade. So, I started choosing me. I joined a community center group for widows. I started volunteering at the library twice a week, helping children with reading lessons. The laughter of those kids filled a part of me that had been hollow for years. And slowly the ache softened. Every evening I'd walk past the oak tree and run my fingers along the bark. It had scars from years of storms, from insects, from weather, but it was still standing. Stronger, in fact. Its roots ran deep. Maybe I was more like that tree than I thought. Then, about 3 months later, I got a letter. It wasn't from her. It was from the buyer who'd backed out of the house deal. He'd discovered inconsistencies in the sale documents and decided not to proceed. Miss Evans confirmed it. The house was safe, for now. When she told me over the phone, I didn't cry, I didn't shout. I just sat there, staring at the sunlight hitting the window pane, feeling something quiet bloom in my chest. Peace, relief, justice, maybe all three. For years, I'd believed my worth was tied to that home, to the people in it, to the role I played. Now I understood something deeper. I was more than what I lost. That night, I sat by the oak tree again. The breeze was soft. The stars were just beginning to blink awake. I whispered a prayer, not for her to come back, but for both of us to finally find peace, separately. Because sometimes love means letting go before it destroys you. Sometimes the most powerful act of motherhood is survival. I didn't plan the first confrontation. It happened on a Wednesday, the kind of humid afternoon where the air feels thick with something unsaid. I was sitting on the porch, sorting through a box of old bills when I saw her car, the silver sedan she bought after the sale deposit hit her account, crawl up the driveway. For a moment, I thought I was imagining it, but then the car door opened and there she was, my daughter, my betrayer, holding a takeout cup and wearing sunglasses too large for her face. My hands trembled, not from fear this time, but from something heavier, restraint. She walked up slowly, rehearsed confidence in every step. "Mom," she said softly, removing her glasses, "can we talk?" Her voice, so small, so careful, pierced something in me. For a moment, I saw her at 10 years old, clutching her report card, scared I'd be disappointed, but that illusion faded fast. "About what, Laura?" I asked, keeping my tone level. "The weather? Or the part where you tried to sell the roof over my head?" She sighed, a long, practiced sound, somewhere between annoyance and martyrdom. "Please don't start like that. I didn't come here to fight." "Then why did you come?" Her jaw tightened. "Because this is ridiculous. You've made everything so dramatic. I just want to fix things." I looked at her for a long moment. Her face, so familiar, so foreign, was unreadable. "Fix things?" I repeated. "Do you even understand what you broke?" She frowned, arms folding. "You're being unfair. You left everything to rot. I was helping. You've always been sentimental about that house." "That house," I cut in, "is where I buried your father. It's where I raised you. You didn't just sell walls, Laura. You tried to sell my life." The silence that followed was a vacuum, heavy, suffocating. She looked away first. "You're making this about emotions again. I was being practical." "Practical?" I laughed. "Forging my signature? Lying to the lawyer? That's practical to you?" For a brief moment, something flickered behind her eyes. Shame, maybe? But it vanished as quickly as it came. "You wouldn't understand. You never do. I had debts, real problems. You're retired. You don't need all that space." I stood up, the chair scraping harshly against the porch. "You had options. You had a mother willing to help you if you'd only asked. But you didn't ask, Laura. You took." She opened her mouth to speak, but I wasn't done. "For years, I gave you everything. Every time you stumbled, I was the one on my knees cleaning up the pieces. And this," I gestured to the driveway, to her expensive car, her manicured hands, "this is how you repay me?" "Mom, please," she said, tears welling up. "I made a mistake. I panicked, but we can still—" "No, Laura." My voice was steady now. "You made choices, and now you're going to live with them." She started crying then, real tears this time, the kind that used to melt me instantly. But I didn't move. I didn't reach out. I let her cry, because that was her pain to feel, not mine to fix. After a few minutes, she wiped her face, eyes narrowing. "So that's it? You're just going to cut me off? Your only daughter?" I met her gaze evenly. "I'm not cutting you off, Laura. I'm setting you free. You've been living off my guilt for years. It ends now." She stood there for a moment, speechless, torn between fury and disbelief. When she finally turned to leave, she muttered, "You'll regret this." "I already did," I said quietly. And then she was gone. The second confrontation came through a third party, my sister Helen. Helen had always been Laura's enabler, the bridge between us. That evening, she showed up at my door, clutching her purse like a shield. "I think you should hear her out," she said before even sitting down. "She's not doing well." I sighed. "Helen, I can't keep saving her from herself. She's your daughter, for God's sake. She's been through a lot." "So have I." That shut her up for a second. "She told me you locked her out of your life. She's scared. She says you're being cold." Cold. The word hit like a slap. For years, I was the opposite, warm to a fault, melting every boundary that might have protected me. Now I was finally solid, and they called it cold. "Do you know what she did, Helen? She made a mistake. No, I interrupted. She committed fraud. She tried to sell my home, lied to lawyers, took money, and you want me to comfort her? Her eyes darted away. She's family. So am I. The words hung in the air like a verdict. She didn't reply after that. She just left, quietly, shaking her head. For the first time in years, I didn't feel guilty about letting someone walk away. The third confrontation, the final one before the reckoning, came weeks later, in public. I was at the bank finalizing paperwork with my attorney when Laura stormed in. Her face was red, her voice loud enough to turn heads. "Are you happy now?" she shouted. "You humiliated me. Everyone knows what happened." The attorney looked startled. I just stayed seated. "You did that yourself," I said calmly. "You took everything from me," she cried. "I have nothing left." I met her eyes. Neither did I, and I still managed to build again. For a second, she just stood there, trembling, lost. Then she pointed a finger at me. "You think this makes you the victim? You always play the saint, don't you? The selfless mother everyone pities." I rose slowly, meeting her anger with quiet certainty. "I'm not the victim, Laura. I'm the survivor." And with that, I turned to the attorney and said, "Let's continue." Her voice cracked behind me. "You don't love me." I stopped, turned back, and said the truth I'd been carrying for months. "I do love you. I always will. But love doesn't mean letting you destroy me." Then I walked away, and for the first time, she didn't follow. That night, I sat alone by the window, moonlight spilling across the floor. My hands were steady, my breathing was calm. I thought about every word, every tear, every confrontation. I realized something profound. The peace I'd been waiting for wasn't something she could give me. It was something I'd earned, and I intended to keep it.
The reckoning happened on a Thursday morning, one of those bright, deceitfully calm days when the sky is too blue for what's about to come. I was folding laundry when the knock came. Firm, repeated, not the hesitant kind a visitor makes, the kind that expects obedience. When I opened the door, two people stood on my porch. One was a man in a navy suit, the kind that smells of paperwork and stale coffee. The other, standing half a step behind him, was Laura. Her hair was neatly tied back, her face expressionless. It was the first time I'd seen her in months. "Mrs. Walker," the man said, glancing at a clipboard, "I'm here on behalf of Miss Laura Jennings regarding the property dispute. We filed a petition to—" I raised a hand. "I know who you are. You're her lawyer." He blinked. "Yes, ma'am. She's contesting the freeze placed on the property. She claims partial ownership as next of kin." Next of kin. That phrase felt like a blade twisted in slow motion. I looked at my daughter, this stranger wearing my child's face. "So this is what it's come to, Mom," I asked softly. "You're suing me for the house?" Her lips parted. "I didn't want it to come to this, Mom, but you left me no choice." My pulse thudded in my ears. "No choice?" I repeated. "You forged documents, stole funds, tried to sell what wasn't yours, and I left you no choice?" The lawyer shifted uncomfortably, sensing the emotional undercurrent, but unable to escape it. "Ma'am," he said carefully, "we can discuss this civilly, perhaps through mediation." "No," I interrupted. My voice was calm, steady, the kind that comes from being done. "There will be no mediation. I have every receipt, every message, every bank record. You can file all the petitions you want. You will lose." I turned my gaze back to her. "And this time, I won't be the one cleaning up your mess." For a flicker of a moment, the mask cracked. I saw it, the panic behind her eyes. But she doubled down, like always. "You're being cruel. You're my mother. You're supposed to protect me." I felt something inside me shift, the last thread of guilt snapping cleanly.
I did protect you, I said quietly, from everything. The world, consequences, even yourself. And look what that made you. Her face reddened. You don't get to judge me. I'm not judging you, Laura. I'm just not saving you anymore. The lawyer glanced between us, clearly wishing he were anywhere else. Perhaps we should reconvene. I nodded. Yes. In court. My attorney will handle it from here. And then I closed the door. It wasn't over, of course. These things never are. Weeks passed. Letters, calls, legal threats. My lawyer, Ms. Evans, remained steady as stone. She built the case piece by piece. Every forged document, every fraudulent transfer, every email where Laura pretended to be me. By the time the court date arrived, the story was airtight. The courtroom was cold, too bright. The air smelled faintly of paper and disinfectant. Laura sat across from me, her once polished look slightly frayed around the edges. Her lawyer whispered something in her ear, but she didn't respond. When the judge entered, everyone rose. I should have been nervous, but I wasn't. Not anymore. I wasn't there to fight for a house. I was there to fight for myself. Ms. Evans presented everything with surgical precision. The forged signature, the timeline of withdrawals, the false listing on the real estate portal. The evidence spoke louder than any accusation ever could. When Laura's turn came, her lawyer painted her as desperate, emotionally distraught, misunderstood. He said, she believed her mother no longer had the mental or financial capacity to manage the estate. That line cut deep. Mental capacity. They were calling me unfit. When my turn came, I stood slowly. My knees trembled, but my voice didn't. I'm 70, I began, my voice steady. Not senile, not helpless. I built that home with my husband, paid every mortgage bill, every repair, every tax. And when my daughter, the person I trusted most, decided my worth ended where her greed began, I didn't crumble. I gathered proof. I sought counsel. I stood here. The room was silent. Even the judge looked moved. I love my daughter, but love isn't blindness. Love doesn't mean giving someone the right to erase your life and call it care. I raised her to be strong, but I forgot to teach her that strength doesn't mean taking from those who made you. For a moment, Laura looked up at me, eyes wide, shimmering with something almost human again. Guilt? Maybe. Recognition? Possibly. But I couldn't let that sway me. Not anymore. When I sat down, Ms. Evans placed a gentle hand on my arm. You did beautifully, she whispered. The judgment came 2 weeks later. The court declared the sale void. The title was restored to my name. The funds she took were to be repaid in installments. Small, but symbolic. And an injunction barred her from any future transactions involving my property. Legally, I'd won. Emotionally, it felt like losing and winning all at once. The last time I saw her was outside the courthouse. She stood by her car, head down, clutching her purse. When she saw me, she hesitated, then walked over. "Mom," she said softly, "I didn't think it would end this way." "Neither did I." Her eyes were red. "I never wanted to hurt you." "Yes, you did. Maybe not at first. But you wanted what you wanted more than you wanted me." She swallowed, lips trembling. "So, what happens now?" I looked past her at the courthouse doors closing behind us. Now we both live with the choices we made. I reached into my bag and handed her a small envelope. Inside was a single photograph, the one of her at 6 years old beside the oak tree. "I hope one day you remember who you were before all this, because that's the girl I still love." Then I turned and walked away. This time I didn't look back. When I got home, I stood in front of the oak tree. Its branches swayed gently in the wind, whispering like an old friend. I laid a hand on the bark and whispered, "It's over?" But I knew it wasn't really over. It was simply mine again. My house, my peace, my story. And that was enough.
6 months passed before I realized I was no longer waiting for the phone to ring. It's strange how silence, once unbearable, can become a kind of comfort. The house no longer echoed with anxiety. Instead, it hummed softly with small, ordinary sounds. The kettle boiling, birds tapping at the window, the creak of the oak outside in the wind. Peace, I discovered, isn't loud. It doesn't arrive with fanfare or victory music. It slips in quietly one morning while you're rinsing a cup and realizing you haven't thought about the past in hours. After the court case, I gave myself permission to rest, really rest, for the first time in decades. At first, I didn't know how. I'd spent years living on alert, waiting for the next crisis, the next plea, the next manipulation disguised as affection. So when the world finally stopped spinning, I didn't know what to do with my hands. I tried gardening again. The soil felt foreign at first, dense, unwelcoming, but eventually it yielded. The marigolds took root, the roses began to climb again. It felt poetic, almost indulgent that things could bloom here again. Some evenings I'd sit on the porch with a cup of tea, watching the sun dip behind the oak tree, painting the yard gold. I'd trace the lines of my palms and think about all the things they'd held. Children, burdens, paperwork, grief. Now, they held peace. Laura didn't contact me for a while. The injunction kept her at a legal distance. But even beyond that, I think shame built its own wall between us. Every now and then, Helen would mention her in passing. She's working again, or she moved to a new apartment. I listened, nodded, and said nothing. There was no bitterness, just distance. Like reading the ending of a book you once loved, but no longer felt the need to reopen. I wasn't angry anymore. I'd done my mourning. But mourning doesn't only belong to loss, it belongs to transformation too. You have to grieve the version of yourself who tolerated pain before you can become the one who doesn't. 3 months after the judgment, I adopted a cat. I named her Daisy, a scrawny gray thing from the shelter with a torn ear and the loudest purr I'd ever heard. She followed me everywhere, to the porch, the kitchen, the garden, curling up beside me like a small living anchor. Her presence was wordless company, something uncomplicated, unearned, and pure. For years, I tried to earn love. Now, I just accepted it. Money was tight, but manageable. The new financial advisor Miss Evans introduced me to helped me set up a budget and small investments. And for the first time, I looked at my bank statement and felt in control rather than ashamed. I even began tutoring part-time at the community center, helping children with writing just as I once helped Laura. The irony wasn't lost on me, but it didn't hurt. In fact, it healed something. One of my students, a shy boy named Samuel, once asked me, "Miss Walker, how come you're always smiling even when we mess up?" I laughed softly. "Because I used to think mistakes ruined everything," I told him. "Now I know they're just how we learn." He nodded solemnly, as though I'd handed him a secret. Maybe I had. Seasons changed. The first snow fell, then melted. The house, once haunted by echoes of betrayal, became warm again. One evening, while organizing old letters, I came across a small envelope tucked inside a recipe book. My name was written on it in familiar handwriting. Laura's. I hesitated before opening it. My heart didn't race, but it did ache, quietly. Inside was a single sheet of paper. "Mom, I know you don't owe me anything. Not forgiveness, not trust. But I wanted you to know I'm trying. I started therapy. I got a job, not a great one, but mine. I'm learning what it means to stand on my own. You were right about everything, even the things I hated hearing. I don't expect you to write back. I just needed you to know I'm still your daughter. And I'm sorry. Love, Laura." I read it twice.
My eyes stung, but not with grief, with gratitude. Not because everything was fixed, but because it didn't have to be. Healing, I realized, doesn't mean reunion. It means being able to read a letter like that without reopening old wounds. So I folded it neatly, placed it in a small wooden box, and whispered, "Thank you." Life after that became simple again. Not perfect, not dramatic, just real. Mornings were for tea and sunlight, afternoons for volunteering or baking, evenings for quiet music and Daisy's rhythmic purring. Every so often I'd pass by the oak tree and rest my hand on its bark. Its scars were still visible, but its roots were strong, deeper than before. And I realized something then. Healing doesn't erase what happened. It grows around it, the way the tree grows around a wound, protecting it, but never pretending it didn't exist. That's what I was doing, growing around my wounds. And for the first time in years, I wasn't just surviving, I was living.
It was late spring when I saw her again. The day smelled like rain, heavy, sweet, and clean. I'd just finished planting lavender along the edge of the porch when I heard a car pull into the driveway. The sound startled me. Few people came by unannounced anymore. When I looked up, Laura was standing by the mailbox, one hand gripping the strap of her bag, the other twisting nervously at the hem of her coat. She looked smaller than I remembered. Older, too, not by years, but by the kind of exhaustion life etches into you when you've been running from yourself. For a moment, neither of us moved. The distance between us was only a few yards, but it felt like a lifetime. Then she spoke first. "Hi, Mom." Her voice cracked a little on Mom. I didn't answer right away. I studied her. The tired eyes, the tentative smile, the way her shoulders hunched like she was ready to be turned away. "Hi, Laura," I said finally. My tone was calm, not cold, just real. She nodded, glancing down. "I didn't want to come without asking. I was nearby and I thought maybe..." She stopped herself, pressing her lips together. "You don't have to let me in. I just wanted to see you." The silence between us swelled. The wind rustled through the oak leaves, scattering pale petals across the lawn like soft confessions. I could have told her to leave. 6 months ago, maybe I would have. But now, standing there in the fading light, I realized I wasn't angry anymore, just tired of carrying the weight of something that no longer needed to define us. "Come in," I said quietly. She blinked. "Really?" I nodded. "Just for tea." Inside, everything felt smaller, cozier than before. She glanced around. The same curtains, the same photo of her father by the mantel. I could see the memories flickering across her face like ghosts. "You kept everything the same," she murmured. "Mostly," I said, setting 2 mugs on the table. Some things weren't worth changing. We sat across from each other, the air between us steeped in unspoken history. Finally, she whispered, "I didn't think you'd ever want to see me again." "I didn't," I said, honestly. "Not for a long time." Her eyes welled up. "I know. I don't blame you." I stirred my tea slowly. "You hurt me in a way I didn't think was possible. You took the only place that still felt like home." She nodded, tears slipping down her cheeks. "I know. I thought I could fix everything later. I thought you'd understand. I was drowning, and I thought if I just..." She broke off, shaking her head. "There's no excuse. I was selfish, and I'm so sorry, Mom." I let her words hang there. They didn't erase anything, but they didn't sting like they used to. "You were lost, and I kept trying to save you when maybe what you needed was to learn to swim."
She let out a trembling laugh through her tears. You always did talk in metaphors. It's how I survived you. That made her laugh again, even as she wiped her eyes. Then, quieter, she asked, Can I ever make it up to you? I looked at her. Really looked. The woman in front of me wasn't the manipulative stranger who signed away my home. She was the frightened, flawed human being who'd finally stopped running. I don't need you to make it up to me. I just need you to never become that person again. She nodded slowly, taking that in like a vow. We talked for almost an hour, about small things, work, her apartment, the stray cat that followed her home one night. It wasn't the deep reconciliation she might have hoped for, but it was real, honest, gentle. When she stood to leave, she hesitated at the door. Would it be okay if I visited again sometime? I'll call first. I smiled faintly. We'll see. That's fair. And then as she stepped off the porch, she turned back and said something that stayed with me long after she drove away. I used to think love meant someone always saving you. Now I know it means saving yourself so you don't destroy the people who love you. I watched her car disappear down the road, and for the first time in years, I didn't feel the ache of goodbye. I felt peace. That night, I wrote in my journal, Forgiveness isn't letting someone back in. It's letting yourself walk freely out of the pain they left behind. And I meant it.
A year has passed now. The house still stands, sunlit and quiet. The lavender blooms stronger every season. Daisy still naps by the window, her tail flicking lazily when the wind shifts. Sometimes I catch myself thinking about how fragile life is, how easily everything you built can be taken away in a single careless act. But then I remember, what's meant for you can't be sold out from under you. Because home isn't wood and nails, it's the piece you rebuild when the dust settles. People often ask if I ever fully forgave Laura. I tell them forgiveness isn't a switch, it's a garden. You tend it slowly, and some days it wilts, but eventually it blooms again in ways you didn't expect. I don't know what the future holds for her or for us. Maybe one day we'll sit on this porch together again and watch the sunset without ghosts between us. Or maybe we won't. Either way, I'll be fine. Because the woman who once stood frozen at the door, clutching the papers that ended her life as she knew it, she's gone now. The woman I am today knows her worth doesn't depend on anyone's apology. She knows that love, when healthy, feels like sunlight, not obligation. She knows that even when everything you thought was permanent falls apart, there's always something inside you still standing, waiting to rebuild. I glance out the window. The oak trees swing gently in the evening light. Its roots run deep, deeper than loss, deeper than betrayal. And so do mine.